welcome to episode 10. You're listening to The Liberal Conservative, and I'm your host, Judy. Today's episode is called Women and the Patriarchy. This one is for every woman who ever sat silently in a room full of men pretending to be in charge. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the real story of how the world was structured to benefit male power. We're talking about the first systems, the first gods, the first laws, and how they were all built to cage women, not because we were weak, but because we were too powerful to let live free. Before the lie, the world was a matriarchy, and it actually looked like this. Before patriarchy, before borders, before temples, taxes, religions, kings, there was balance. Balance that we created, balance that we still create in our own lives, in our own families. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in nomadic, hunter-gathering societies. We lived in small groups, followed food and seasons, and made decisions collectively. These communities were often matriarchal in essence, meaning the descent was traced through the mother's line. Why? Because everyone knew who the mother was. Everyone still does. Women weren't just childbearers. They were spiritual leaders, healers, food providers, and sexual agents of their own choosing. And yes, believe it or not, we chose who to sleep with as well. Monogamy wasn't the standard. Sexuality was fluid, and homosexuality and bisexuality were natural extensions of communal bonding and not suppressed or shamed. Love and sex were expressions of connection, not ownership. Children were raised collectively. There wasn't a nuclear family in the modern sense. The entire village shared in the care, discipline, and education of children. Not one asked, who does that child belong to? Because the answer was all of us. There were no virginity tests, no fathers giving daughters away, no commodification of the womb. In this world, goddesses ruled fertility, the moon, the earth, all were seen as feminine forces. The earliest spiritual symbols were carved as female figures. Wide hips, pregnant bellies, powerful, life-giving bodies. This was a world of sacred feminine power. The shift happened during agriculture, inheritance, and the male panic. And it never ended. We're still living in that. Then came the Neolithic Revolution. It was around 10,000 BCE. Humans began farming. Farming created surplus, and surplus created ownership. For the first time in human history at that time, people stayed in one place. They built homes, they stored grain, they domesticated animals, and suddenly land and places had value. And with the land having value came inheritance. The moment men realized they could amass land, wealth, and power through lineage, they faced a question. How do I ensure my son inherits this? And they couldn't, unless they controlled the women. Because maternal lineage was visible and paternity was not, this triggered a deep cultural shift. Women were no longer trusted to choose their lovers. Monogamy was imposed, but only on women. Virginity became currency, and marriage became a contract of property. Women's sexuality became an economic liability. If a woman had multiple partners, it threatened the patriarchal bloodline. This was the male panic that birthed patriarchy. So how did they make women submit, though? Well, here's the enforcement. Submission, shame, and rewriting the narrative. They didn't ask, they forced it. Step by step, they built a system, veiling women to hide their bodies and enforce modesty. Dowries and bride prices that framed women as property. Adultery laws with death as the punishment only for women. Honor culture that blamed women for male desire. They erased goddesses, replacing them with angry male gods. The divine feminine became the source of temptation, evil, and sin. Women were now responsible for the fall of man. And those who resisted were burned, banished, or silenced. This wasn't just an economic shift. It was a psychological war against the feminine. The biggest propaganda machine they used? Religion. So when did religion happen? And did religion actually serve as the rewriting of realities prior to its existence? Organized religion, as we know it, emerged around 3000 BCE, especially in Mesopotamia. Do you guys want to guess, if you don't already know, where current-day Mesopotamia is right now? Well, it is none other than modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And what's so terrifying about this, when I think about it and when I researched for this episode, is the fact that this was 3000 BCE. And if we look at those territories right now, there has been an astronomical amount of little evolution, right? The human species and the human men in these territories have evolved so little, because these territories are still enormously oppressing the feminine. It is where it began. It is where it continues to live forcefully. I can only imagine what this territory and what the world would look like had we continued the path of natural existence, which is the feminine divine. If we would have continued to understand that the power was held with female and allowed it to flourish the way it should have been, allowed it to evolve the way it should have, where would the world be right now and what would it look like? I digress. Religions like the Zoroastrian, I can't even pronounce what this is, the Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and eventually Christianity and Islam developed systems that framed women as submissive to men, used creation myths to justify male authority, Eve from Adam's rib, instituted laws that punished women and protected male dominance. Philosophers in ancient Greece like Aristotle further justified this system with pseudoscience. The male is by nature superior and the female inferior, and the one rules and the other is ruled. Religious law, philosophical theory, and political structure merged into one thing: patriarchy institutionalized. And this is the legacy that we're still unfortunately trying to dismantle and dismantling. What we're living in today, it's a remix of that ancient system. Why do we obsess over paternity, blame women for rape, legislate women's bodies while celebrating male promiscuity, shame single mothers but glorify absentee fathers? Because patriarchy never ended, it just adapted, and women are still forced to fight for autonomy, representation, safety, and truth. But here's what they didn't count on. We remember. We are the descendants of those early priestesses, healers, and warriors. We are the return of the divine feminine. Can you imagine it's 2025 and you're still not knowing that religion is a hoax and that it's literally a part of a patriarchal society, and that it's false, and that the higher power is the women that are living in the world and the women that have lived in the world, and it's our calling. The higher power is us. There is no male figure above that's waiting for you to die to tell you if you're going to go to heaven or hell. We are it. The women are it. And men could not stand the fact that we are so powerful that they had to create this fake God that doesn't exist, that is judging us from afar because that's just the way it is. They cannot live knowing that they are inferior. That's how inferior they are. It's that they can't even handle truth. Even today, we see the legacy of this control system in multiple modern religions. In Islamic theocracies like Iran, women are still forced to wear the hijab under threat of arrest. Can you imagine? Flogging, or even worse. Women cannot dance in public, sing solo, or travel freely without male permission. Female sexuality is strictly controlled, and punishments for defiance are often brutal. Like, can you imagine? We can't let us fucking breathe. What is your fucking problem? In Iraq, despite some modern reforms, women's rights have regressed due to religious militia, control and post-war instability. Child marriage, honor killings, and legal rape within marriage still plague many regions. In ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jewish communities, women are expected to cover their hair, obey their husbands, and bear as many children as possible. They are often denied formal education in subjects beyond religion, and divorce is entirely dependent on male approval through the issuance of a get. In Afghanistan, now under Taliban rule again, girls are banned from education past a certain age, women are flogged for showing skin, barred from jobs, and confined to their homes. The message is fucking consistent. Control her body, control her mind, control the future. Philosophers in ancient Greece, like I said, continued, and I guess like they allowed, there was no philosopher that, well, I mean, at least as popular as Aristotle, that defied this patriarchy system. Plato spoke of ideal forms, but placed women at the bottom of his republic hierarchy. Later, Christian thinkers like Augustine and Thomas Aquinas embedded these patriarchal ideas into religious law. Religious law, philosophical theory, and political structure merged all together, like I said before. And by the way, do you ever ask yourself, why were all the philosophers that we read about in philosophy class, why were they all male? Where are the female philosophers? You're telling me they didn't have one fucking thought? There was not a female on earth that wanted to be a philosopher? There was none. Where are their writings? From my research, all I came up with was Pythagoras. He was heavily influenced by Orphic and Egyptian mystical traditions, which still preserved elements of goddess worship. He believed in the sacred harmony of opposites, including male and female energies, and revered the number 2, the feminine, as necessary to balance the number 1. But even the fact that the number 2 is feminine, we created you. Like, we're number 1, you're number 2. Like, what is so difficult to understand about that? It's mind-boggling. His wife was Theano, was also a philosopher and mathematician who wrote about ethics and the soul. Most of her work was attributed to him, of course, or conveniently lost. Then there was Empedocles, who spoke of love and strife as the 2 primal forces of the universe. Love was linked with unity, compassion, and the feminine principle. He described a golden age where all beings lived in peace, often interpreted as a memory of a pre-patriarchal goddess-centered world. Then we also had Plotinus. He emphasized a cosmic source, the one from which everything emanated. Later, thinkers built on his framework to argue that the divine feminine was inseparable from divine intelligence or soul. But here's the pattern. Even when male philosophers tapped into feminine divinity, they either abstracted her, buried her in metaphysics, or erased her personal agency. They remembered the goddess, but only as an idea, not a person. So, right, like, where were the female philosophers? Well, there definitely were, but they were systemically erased or written out of the canon. And the reason women didn't dominate philosophy, it's because women were excluded from formal education. They were excluded from writing and publishing, were forbidden or inaccessible. Male historians ignored or destroyed their work or stole it. Women who spoke out were often punished as, witches or they were mad. We remember all these stories, right? The only thing we have was Hypatia of Alexandria. She was a mathematician and astronomer and philosopher, led the Neoplatonist school in Alexandria, murdered by a Christian mob who stripped her naked and flayed her alive with tiles. She was a symbol of female wisdom, and they made her a warning. Then there was Diotima of Mantinea, a woman philosopher and priestess who taught Socrates about love. In Plato's Symposium, she articulates the ladder of love, a path to divine truth. Many scholars believe she was real, but their teachings were absorbed into male texts, of course, and not preserved under her name. Arete, which is interesting because in Spanish that means earring, a rite of Cyrene, taught over 100 philosophers, including her son Aristippus, wrote over 40 books. None of them survived. Women didn't fail to philosophize. Men failed to preserve their voices, or worse, they stole their voices and erased their history and their purpose. So the reason that you don't see female names in ancient philosophy is the same reason we don't see female prophets, female emperors, or female lawmakers. Patriarchy continues to burn the receipts of our progress. And the few men who remembered the feminine divine, they either veiled her in metaphor or got sidelined in favor of violent gods and warlike kings. I'm going to end with this. Women create life. That's it. Feminine creates life in the animal kingdom and in human beings. We are the creators of life, which means that had we not been oppressed, we would have created a world and a life so different than the world and the life and the earth that we are currently living in. Because I've said this so many times, right now, the inferior gender is forcefully ruling the earth, even though they, without a doubt, are not the natural born leaders. The natural born leaders are the women. And that is why we are so unevolved. That is why we're still stuck in a patriarchal system that was built in 3000 BCE in Mesopotamia. That is why. Because these people, these men, have not allowed for the natural progression of leadership to emerge. It's always been us. It will always be us. And it is about time that we unite unconditionally, unapologetically, with all of our might and our power that we hold, and we take the system down.